In this episode, I'm going to be speaking to Louise Azzopardi. Louise is an inspirational young lady. She's a life coach. She's qualified heavy vehicle mechanic and trainer, an assessor. She speaks all over the place. She's been featured on Channel 7 News and Sunrise and all sorts of places. And I'm not sure how old she is now, and I know it's probably not the right thing to ask a lady how old she is, but we're going to find out, because when I discovered Louise, the video that I watched, she was only 23 years old at the time, and she'd already done a lifetime's worth of accomplishments that are quite unusual and very inspirational. So I'm quite excited to be able to speak to Louise. Louise, welcome to the podcast. Tell us, where do we find you? Where are you sitting right now?
I am sitting in the lovely Hawkesbury area outside of Sydney.
Nice. Do you like boating?
So I don't really go out on boats much, but I do enjoy it.
You live up the Hawkesbury. That's craziness.
Yeah. Well, there's a bit of extra water at the moment.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm down in Hobart, or just out of Hobart, and we need it, so send it our way. It's as dry as down here. But we're not here to talk about the weather. We're here to talk about you, and I'd really love you just to give us the backstory. Like, I believe, similar to me, I decided that I was smart enough after grade 10 and didn't need any more education, and went into the workforce as an electrician. And how I did that was, my dad said, I came home from high school, and he said, there's an electrician coming over to give you a job tonight, and if you don't take it, you can work for me. So that made my decision easy, that I became an electrician. What was your story?
So kind of similar, like the year 10 part, I knew year 11 and 12, university, it was just not on the agenda for me. I actually tried to leave school in year 7, but my parents wouldn't have it. Okay. So yeah, I grew up on a farm. My parents grow tomatoes in greenhouses. So I was always helping with picking and packing and repairing farm machinery and riding motorbikes. And I couldn't really see the way that school was connecting to the workforce, because my parents had this business that was growing and growing, and we were fairly well off. And I was like, how does this English essay mean anything to my life in the future? So that was kind of my attitude as a young teen. And my parents were just like, okay, if you get an apprenticeship or something at the end of year 10, then you can leave. So went through all my schooling, got to the beginning of year 10. I worked out that I wanted to be a mechanic. I didn't settle on heavy vehicle mechanics. I was thinking more motorcycle mechanics. Yeah. But I wanted to do work experience, because that's how I had seen other people get into apprenticeships. So I went to my careers advisor and I was like, can I do work experience? And he's like, okay, go find some. And I found some, and they were like, okay, we need the paperwork. And my careers advisor was like, he just didn't give me the paperwork. And my dad ended up having to call the school and being like, can we please have the paperwork? We've got work experience lined up for her. And the careers advisor told him that I was too smart to be a mechanic. And I was like, now looking at that, like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a bizarre thing to say.
I know. But anyway, going on from there, I did work experience in all of my school holidays. It left me with a few options at the end, but none of them were quite right. And I ended up going to a careers expo where I had 3 really life-changing conversations. The first conversation was really short and sharp. This guy was like, we wouldn't recommend our daughters to work here. We wouldn't want any females to work here. And I later found out that male apprentices had been sexually harassed at that workshop. So I got out of that one. The second conversation was more of a lecture, where this guy lectured me and my dad for about 10 minutes about how I couldn't be a motorcycle mechanic at this point. He was like, you can't move the bikes around. You're not big enough to move the bikes around, so you can't be a mechanic. And it was ridiculous. Like, looking back on it, I was like, mate, whatever. And I was pretty disheartened after this. So my parents were like, look, we're here. Let's keep walking through the expo. And we did. And we come up to a stand and I met Sarah. So Sarah at the time was a first-year heavy vehicle mechanic. And she was the same height as me and the same build as me. And her existence just disproved everything this guy had said. And she encouraged me to do work experience at her work, and I did, and I loved it. I applied for the job, but I didn't think I was going to get it because they were seeking year 12 leavers with their license. And at this point in time, I was like 15 and a half. So I didn't even have my learners or anything. I was quite young. But I ended up getting the position, which was amazing. So I started my apprenticeship when I was 15 in 2012.
Yeah. And on Cummins diesel engines?
Yeah, that's it.
I happen to know that. I've got two of them in the boat, 5.9 litres, so you're probably familiar with it. Quite a bizarre set of circumstances. And like, I want to get into the coaching that you do in just a little while, but I'm really interested in your own development and how you develop thoughts, how you develop resilience, how you develop self-confidence in the face of these types of challenges. Because at such a young age, it's rare for someone to be so resilient. Like at that young age, you tend to buy into what the adults tell you. You didn't do that. What were your influences? What were you thinking and saying to yourself to be able to deal with that sort of consistent messaging that you're in the wrong place?
Yeah, so it was kind of looking back on it, it's a bit, it's probably not the answer that a lot of people want to hear, but pretty much I was pretty rebellious. It was, if someone told me I couldn't do it or I shouldn't do it, I was going to do it.
Okay.
So that was my mentality between 15 to 20, maybe 22.
You'd be pretty easy to manipulate with reverse psychology.
Yeah, but nobody worked that out on me, so we did pretty good with that. But yeah, I was really driven by the fact that people told me I couldn't do it. And looking at the reasons, they didn't really have any good reasons. My size, I had known mechanics, like male mechanics that were as tall as me, the same, like similar build as me. They weren't big guys that were being mechanics. So in my mind, I was like, well, size obviously isn't an issue. Like, what are you even talking about? And in my mind, like, I don't know how you guys speak on the workshop in this podcast, but really, I didn't see anything mechanical.
We say whatever we want to. You say whatever you want to say.
All right, so I didn't see any part of being a mechanic that actually involved a penis.
Yeah.
So being a woman didn't seem like
when you think about it, it's not all that useful as a mechanic.
That's
really?
it. So really, that my teenage brain was like, I've seen people my size do it, and that anatomy is not needed. No. So I don't understand where this is coming from.
Did you say that to somebody? Did you say that to anybody?
I think it was a lot of internal.
What do you need a penis for?
Pretty much. It was a lot of internal stuff. I think I actually come across someone, when I become a trainer and assessor, one of my training gigs. So long story short, I was a mechanic for 7.5 years. Then I was a trainer and assessor full-time for 2 years. And then I started my coaching business. And while I was doing my coaching business and getting it off the ground, I was doing part-time training and assessing. And at this point in my life, I come across a mechanic who was owning a business, and I was training his apprentices. And he knew me as a first-year apprentice. And he's like, I can't believe how much you talk these days. Like, I don't think you said a word in the first year of your apprenticeship.
But you learned how to communicate. So, I don't know. I've been involved in performance coaching in one way or another for over 3 decades, but I was still a lot older than what you are when I first started. I'm really interested in the thought process that you had that caused you to want to get into coaching. For me, it was one phrase that I heard from Tony Robbins back in the very early 1990s. You've read about the 1990s in the history books, I'm sure. But he said, we teach what we most need to learn. And it was one of the most impactful statements that I heard. And it's like, I'm learning all of this personal development stuff, how to use my mind better and how to develop my skills and my perceptions and communication and all of that sort of stuff. I need that. And the simplest way, and it just made so much sense, if you're learning something from a perspective where you've got to teach it to somebody else tomorrow, the process that you go through and the commitment that you have to learn is much, much higher. So I'm going to learn it better if I'm going to teach it. That was my motivation. What was yours?
Yeah, so I kind of had a pretty vague goal. So I started getting interviewed. I won a few awards at TAFE, and then I competed in the World Skills Competition, which is like the Olympics for tradies. So I competed when I was a fourth year regionally, and I came second. Then I competed nationally in 2016, where I won gold, and then I competed internationally in 2017, where I placed fourth in the world. And it was an amazing journey, but there were no women beside me. And having this kind of being in this platform, I was getting interviewed a lot. So people ask me, like, what are your goals? Where do you see yourself in the future? And I would say, I see myself in a position where I could help other women. I had no idea what it was. I was just like, I don't know where I'm going, but I'm going to go somewhere that can help other women. Really, like for me, there was so many times where I needed help, I needed support, but it was either being a teenager for all of my apprenticeship, it was coming from an adult that I knew hadn't experienced the things that I'd experienced as a young woman in a male-dominated workspace. These people were trying to give me advice, and I was just blocking it purely, I'm pretty sure, just mostly teenage brain. But then a lot of the, I'll admit that. But then that's something that kind of, when I come across coaching, which was during COVID, actually, I was working from home. A coach that I followed on LinkedIn put on a workshop, and then he had some free coaching calls. And I did one of the free coaching calls, and we were talking about, career progression, because I was feeling quite stuck. I was training and assessing, so I was teaching mechanics at a fairly large, well-known company that said that they supported women and well-being. But in my experience, where I was coaching apprentices as well as trade upgrade students, so students who had one qualification who were upgrading to another one. So I was teaching people from the ages of 16 to about 60. These people, mostly men, were not having good experiences, but the company was telling us that we were having good experiences, but they weren't lining up. And I was getting angry, and I was like, what can I do with this? Like, what can I really do? I want to do more. And then I come across coaching and speaking, so speaking as a profession. And I had done some speaking gigs, and I really loved the way that I could empower an audience. And then when I discovered coaching, I was like, this is amazing. Like, you can empower an audience, and if they want to take action and they need help, then you can help them with coaching. And that's kind of where the seed was planted for me, like putting these two together and really being a technical trainer. So teaching mechanics, teaching how engine works. So much of mechanical knowledge is taught through learning in the workplace. Yep. And if you're struggling mentally, if you're not communicating well, if you've got stuff going on at home, if you have so much self-doubt that you can barely function, then none of this technical knowledge goes in. No matter what trade you are, what you're trying to learn, if you're struggling that way, it doesn't go in. And like working that out for myself as I had worked it out for myself, but I hadn't had language for it. But then when I started passing it on to others through this training platform, then I was like, okay, why don't all tradespeople get this? And because I had kind of entered into the white collar world, becoming a trainer and assessor, and I was in this limbo between white collar and blue collar being a trainer. And I was like, all these white collar people get this training. Like, why isn't it given to tradies? Why isn't it put in language that we can understand and things that we can do when our hours are getting, like, we're charged out by the hour, we're not under a salary, so we can't go take a professional development day because we don't have hours for that. Who is helping these people? And
that's how you became a coach.
Yeah, that's it. If people ask me, the short story is I was pissed off, so I wanted to do something about it.
Well, that's as good a reason as I can think of. I want to get a little bit more into the coaching and some detail about that in a moment, but I am just fascinated by the whole the competition side of things. So I from memory, 2017 Abu Dhabi, that was the international competition. You placed fourth. What are the events? So what are you actually doing? What are the different events that you participated in?
Yeah, so in the mechanical section, so I competed in the heavy vehicle mechanics section. So the competitions run in about 60 different categories, like hairdressing, carpentry, cooking. So each section has its own kind of way of being run.
Mm.
But for mechanics and like for heavy vehicle, light vehicle, I think for auto electrical, it's pretty similar as well. We have like 6 stations, and most of them are like breakdowns. So it'll be a machine, and it's like, okay, there's a fault with the hydraulic system, there's a fault with the driveline, there's a fault with the electrical, the engine, and you have a certain amount of time to safely diagnose the fault and either fix it or give your recommendation to fix it. And usually there's multiple faults. So when you find one, then you fix it, then another one comes up. And the aim is to have almost too much work to do in the allotted time that you have. So it's kind of really testing your skills, and you're marked on your communication. So the judge is like a customer that you're communicating with.
Mm.
And then your safety, your technical knowledge, your ability to diagnose, your tool use and stuff like that. So yeah, it was 6 stations over 3 days. So you do 2 each day. For nationals and internationals, it was set up like that. For regionals, it was shorter. It was 45 minutes a station. So we all did it in a day. But yeah, it's that fault finding, that being able to think on your feet, not only think, but then communicate what you're thinking and give a diagnosis.
Wow, that's amazing. Big audiences, you get big audiences, or is it just the participants there?
So regionals typically is just participants, and usually it's run at a TAFE or a training center. So then you've got like just the other students and the other teachers as well. Nationals and internationals, you do get quite an audience. It's really good how they do it, because they set it up so then schools can come in and they're pretty much watching us do our job, which I find is a really amazing setup. Yeah. And it's generally open to the public. Parents can come and watch, friends can come and watch as well. It's really cool.
Yeah. So let's go back to the coaching. I noticed you're wearing the Trade Mutt shirt. We had Shannon Cooper from Trade Mutt's been on the podcast twice. He's a repeat offender. We've had a lot to do with Trade Mutt. We're big supporters of Trade Mutt and TX. And I suspect that managing your mental health when you're in a male-dominated industry like you are, and getting these messages, not getting the support, being treated differently to the males in the industry, I suppose, makes it really, really challenging to maintain your resilience and have, some sort of emotional stability. What are some of the things that you bring to the table with your coaching from a messaging point of view in that space there, just looking after yourself mentally?
Yeah, that's it. So kind of the way that I do my coaching is a bit of a formula where we work out the differences first, and then work on the differences between your internal world, so what you're saying to yourself, what you're thinking, what you believe about yourself, and then your external world. The thing kind of where, because I call myself a coach and a mentor. So typically, a coach, you're asking a lot of questions, and a mentor, you're telling. And I tend to bounce between the two, because so often we're put in situations, especially if you're a young woman, that you really don't have the tools internally. No one's told you to stand up for yourself. Society literally tells women to sit down and be quiet, be polite, be small, and they don't have the tools to stand up for themselves. But really working on the internal world, so what you believe about yourself, the way that you talk to yourself, and your mental health. So if you have a tendency to be more anxious or more depressed, the external world, so your workmates, people around you, different circumstances, can tend to seep in a lot. And being a woman in a male-dominated space, you tend to have a lot of evidence to put yourself down, especially if you have a sexist coworker or you're coming across a lot of unconscious bias, the way that people look at you, if people question you more often. If you've got weak links isn't quite the right way to say it, but if you've got some cracks in your internal belief about yourself, it's really easy for those things to get in.
So how does your one-on-one coaching work? What's the process? Obviously, going to your website and reaching out to you and having a conversation is step one, but what would people expect, you know, somebody listening to this going, I think, you know, because I'm in a similar situation, I would like to be coached or mentored. What can they expect through the experience?
Yeah, so you can expect a lot of acknowledgement. One of the biggest things I find is so many women, they tend to feel like I don't feel confident, I don't have any energy. But some of the reasons why they don't have that is because they haven't acknowledged their feelings that have been happening. So they might have someone being sexist to them at work, or someone saying, you know, that's not a problem, that was just a joke, why is this a problem, kind of thing. So they're trying to tell themselves that their problems don't exist. So we do a lot of acknowledging. And then once we acknowledge, then that really allows them to see and be aware of what's actually happening rather than trying to write it off. So then we'll go out into the world and we'll try and take notice of different things. Let's notice, what's your first thought that pops up to you when you get a job that you haven't worked on before? Or, you know, when your supervisor turns to you and asks you a question, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? And then we try and work out what those thoughts are and if they're working for you or if they're not working for you.
Yeah.
Then we do the thoughts, and then we're like, okay, let's pay attention to the external world. Is there a supervisor or a coworker that you need to pretty much tell them to pull their head in? Are they doing something inappropriate? So then we go on that, and we bounce in between the internal and the external usually, depending, like we'll do a bit of tweaking on the internal, we'll stand up to someone, we'll come and regroup, and we'll go back and forward.
Yeah. Sounds fantastic. Who is the ideal coaching client for you? What do they look like? Where are they from?
Yeah, so pretty much generally any woman that works in a male-dominated space, I'd love to work with them. But typically if they're, you know, got their qualification, they're thinking, what's next for me? How do I manage life and these expectations? I've been pushing for so long and I've felt like I've had to be strong for so long and I'm so tired of being strong. They're kind of the ones that I really like to work with, because a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not strong enough to do this, but you don't have to be strong. You shouldn't have to be strong to go to work every single day.
No. You also work with businesses. So I noticed that you run a series of either webinars or workshops for businesses. What type of businesses, who generally looks to you to come into their business to help out and run the workshops?
Yeah, so with businesses, there's kind of two levels that I work with businesses on. So the first one, which is the one that I tend to do the most of, is running workshops for either an apprentice cohort or for the women within the business, if it's typically a male-dominated business. So one of the most memorable ones that I've done was with My Car, which is the Kmart Tire and Autos, now My Car. So they're a national company. They wanted to do something a little bit extra for the women that work in their service sites. So we did a workshop every quarter with them, going through a different skill, building confidence, goal setting, working through imposter syndrome, managing anxiety in a male-dominated workspace. So doing those kind of workshops to be able to give them something tangible things that they can use day to day. Then on the other side of it, there's working with different leaders within businesses. If a typically male-dominated business would like to start bringing in more women, or they are bringing in more women, and the leaders, they want to give their leaders a few more tools. A lot of leaders within trade businesses are really great mentors. They've been doing it for a long time, but some of them really, just the fact that they're not a woman in a male-dominated space, they've never experienced those kind of things. So I also run a bit of a women in trade awareness for leaders and mentors, so then they can be like, have a crash course on here's all the things that women within male-dominated businesses can go through, and here are some tools to support them with that.
Yeah. Absolutely fascinating speaking with you. This is such an important topic to unpack. I noticed that you also, on your website, there's a scholarship section. Can you unpack that for us? What's that all about? How do you apply? What's the value? What's the benefit in getting a scholarship?
Yeah. So the scholarships that I've been running, actually ran them 3 years in a row, which has been really amazing. It's something I'm really proud of creating. It's pretty much, so in November of each year, the scholarships open. And what the scholarships are for is for 6 months of coaching with me. I would love to get more sponsorship to do even more, but generally we run 2 scholarships a year, and we get women from all over the country. The only requirement is to be over 18 to reside in Australia. So you don't need to be a permanent resident, just living in Australia, and being on the tools or getting back on the tools. I've had some girls come through the scholarship that have been on maternity leave, and they've started the scholarship after they've come back from maternity leave, which has been an amazing experience for me and for them. But the scholarship really is just getting coaching into the hands of more women in more corners of Australia, and then hopefully going to expand the scholarship internationally soon.
Yeah, excellent. That's amazing. And I also know that you're a bit of a podcaster as well. So if you want to hear more from Louise, you can swing by the podcast, which I believe is called Anxious Tradeswoman. Is that what the podcast is called? What sort of things do you cover in the podcast, and where do we find it?
Yeah, so the podcast, my little catch line for my podcast, which I'm quite proud of, is where I share what I've learned through the years, through the tears, so you don't have to.
Yeah.
So pretty much any tips or tricks that can help you better what is going on in your workplace, from topics that are specific to women, so sexism and that kind of thing, but then to more general things like goal setting, getting off the tools, managing difficult coworkers, that kind of thing. And you can find it on most platforms. So you got Spotify, Apple, all those kind of things.
Yeah, brilliant. Fantastic stuff. Look, it's been an absolute pleasure listening to you and even reading about your story. I was quite excited to be able to have the actual conversation with you after I read everything that you'd gone through and everything that you'd accomplished at such a young age. It really is inspirational. Best place for people to get in contact with you, I guess, is louiseazzopardi.com. Fill out the form. We'll make sure we put the link in the description so people can just hit the link and have a conversation with you. But thank you so much for being on the podcast. We love listening to these inspirational stories and people that are out there trying to change the industry and trying to change industry norms. I mean, that's what we're trying to do here in Builders Business Black Belt, is change the industry norms, because it creates a whole lot of pain for the people in the building industry that's unnecessary. You're doing a very, very similar thing, and, you know, I tip my hat to you. It's absolutely brilliant what you're doing, and I really encourage you to keep doing it. So thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So that's it, folks. Another episode of the ToolShed in the can. I hope that got you thinking. And if you know of anybody that would be interested or would gain benefit from speaking to Louise, I encourage you to jump on to louiseazzopardi.com. As I said, the link is in the description. Reach out and have a conversation, because everything begins and ends with the mind and how you think, and that determines how you feel, and that determines how you behave, and that determines how things turn out. So it's so important to be speaking with somebody who can help you through that, who can mentor or coach you through those challenges, so you can manage yourself mentally and emotionally better in those circumstances. And the proof is there that Louise has gone through this, been in a very male-dominated industry, and is succeeding and being inspirational throughout that process. So reach out and have that conversation. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of the ToolShed. I hope you reach out. I hope it got you thinking, and we'll be back with another episode of the ToolShed before you know it. I'm Mick Hawes from Builders Business Black Belt. That is all. I'm out. Bye for now.